Everyone and welcome. So my name is Kate McGough. I'm the head of publishing for primary here at Nelson Primary, and I would really like to welcome Jacinta Conway. So it's very exciting to have you. And Jacinta, if you want to move your slide on so we can see a picture of you as well. So Jacinta is an education and literacy consultant. She's had over 2 decades of experience helping schools and educators turn research into classroom results. So Jacinta's expertise in curriculum and assessment design, particularly in literacy, is matched by her ability to translate evidence-based strategies into practical, impactful teaching. So she works with educators to learn, to lead, and to launch. She builds skills, confidence, and results in the classrooms she supports. And today we're really excited because she'll share actionable approaches to strengthen literacy and empower teachers to lead with clarity and purpose. So please welcome Jacinta. And we're just going to move on one more slide, Jacinta. It's just some housekeeping rules. The session is being recorded, and all of those who registered are joining us today as well, or can't join us. The recording will be sent out within the week. The Q&A is open, and the chat for any questions or comments, please feel free to use it. If we run out of time for a Q&A at the end, a member of staff will be in touch with an answer to your question, or it will be addressed in upcoming webinars with Jacinta. And please reach out to that email address below at aust.primary@cengage.com for any post-event questions. And with that, go Jacinta, 59 minutes to go.
Thank you and welcome everybody. I'm going to begin with an acknowledgement to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation here in Melbourne, with their deep connection to the land, waters and skies, which stretches back for tens of thousands of years. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today. Welcome, and thank you for being here at 4 o'clock, and some of you in New Zealand, I can see, will be a little bit later. We're halfway through the term. We can sort of see the finish line. The days are getting lighter, and it's great to see you all here. We've got a little bit of sunshine today, so we're quite happy here in Melbourne. So let's have a look at what we're doing today. We're looking at moving beyond the sentence, writing with decodables. So the goal of this session is really to look at how can we build reading and writing and make that connection to have them here, to have them both together. So there's been a big shift in the last couple of years, especially with science of reading and the shift to decodable readers. And we know that that's been really necessary, but with that, it's been at times, it hasn't always been smooth. And we're wandering our way through and saying, how do we make all these connections and how can we bring things together? So with that in mind, the goal of this presentation is to say, how can we link in other areas of literacy to complement what we do in the reading space using decodables so that we can support our students with writing. All right, I've got an agenda. There's 5 things that I thought I would sort of break up the session into, and I've sort of done it along the tuning in, background knowledge, looking at the finding out of the science of writing alongside reading. So the tuning in will be looking at reviewing models of reading very quickly, like a snapshot. We'll then look at structured literacy and science of writing in a little bit more depth. And then we're going to look at some decodables and a model of writing to organise our thinking so that we can express what we think and know about what we're reading when we read non-fiction decodables. Finally, we'll put it all together with our strategies and of modelled writing. Okay, background knowledge. What do we need to know about the science of reading, and what do we need to understand about the science of writing? So in review, and I have done this before in a webinar, we've got this simple view of reading. This has become a much more well-known model of reading now. We have at the top of the quadrant, we have good decoding on the right-hand side, and we also have good linguistic comprehension at the top. And we know that we want our readers to be sitting up here in this quadrant. If we have someone that is not sitting up here and they have poor decoding but good comprehension, this tends to fit into a dyslexic profile. And if we have really good decoding but poor linguistic comprehension and poor language skills, this sort of sits into a language disorder or potentially EAL, children and learners who have English as an additional language. If you're sitting in this quadrant over here, you've got a bit of a mixed bag of difficulties, and that will need again, anything that's not in this top right-hand quadrant is going to need more work. In a nutshell, that means that decoding and language comprehension, when we multiply that together, we get, if I can get this to click, reading comprehension. Okay, so that's a simple view of reading. We can then break that down using Scarborough's reading rope, and we can look at word recognition again. So I'll just get my pointer over here, which is that decoding, and it's broken down into its sub-skills. So we've got phonological awareness, phonics, phonemic awareness as well, segmenting and blending sounds, and we use that to decode, and we use our knowledge and understanding of the alphabetic principle to help us to spell and read words. And we know that the more we do the writing and the spelling with the reading, the more the more our literacy skills make sense, and we learn faster. At the top end here of the rope, we've got our language comprehension. So this is where we look at our background knowledge, our vocabulary, language structure, verbal reasoning, and our knowledge for literacy. And you can see these two models sitting together, that they complement each other. And the thing about reading models is we can look at different reading models to look at things from different perspectives about, this is, the first one is a simple view. The reading rope sort of unpacks it a little bit more, and it's about where are we at in our journey and what do we need to take away from this in order to say what do we need to teach and how are we going to teach it. Moving into the science of writing, I've taken two similar models, the simple view of writing, and you can see on the simple view of writing here, in the bottom left-hand section of the triangle, we have transcription. So transcription is your typing and your handwriting, as well as your spelling skills. So they're your fundamental skills that you have to have automatic to be able to access the ability to express what you want to say, express your thoughts in writing. We also have working memory, and we know that working memory plays a really critical role in being able to write. So any learners who have difficulties in working memory really need to have their transcription skills and their spelling skills as automatic as possible, because they need to free up as much working memory in order to organise their thinking to be able to write. And all this, in addition, is where we bring in executive functioning skills. And executive functioning skills is about 10 sub-skills in executive functioning. And some of them I'm going to address that we look at here with writing, being planning, self-monitoring, and staying on task, even task initiation. All these things matter when we want to write. So what's our calculation? Is transcription and ideation for the composition. And if we multiply that together, we get written expression. And written expression, when we look at that in more detail, I'll show you in a few more slides what that looks like. Let's now look at another model of writing that aligns with the reading rope. We've got the writing ropes. This is Jones-Sedita's model, and you can see that we've broken up that simple view of transcription. Down the bottom here with spelling and handwriting, which looks like a small part of the rope, but at the beginning of learning to write, it takes up a whole lot of resources, both in the brain, the memory, the working memory, and also your motor skills and developing the strength to be able to write. And then all the other sub-skills are broken down even more. So we've got writing craft, we've got text structure, syntax, and critical thinking, which again is that idea generation in order to express our thinking for writing. So now I'll look at the, I'll put them together here so you can see now when we look at the reading rope and the writing rope together, that is a lot of information to be thinking about. How do we bring all this together and teach? And the thing is, we actually do a lot of this without really explicitly needing to teach all these components. We can't be labeling all of these parts of the rope while we teach. It's for us to know, and it's for us to be able to organise our thinking in the way we plan so that we can deliver a comprehensive literacy curriculum. These are the sub-skills of executive functioning. I've popped them in here, but I have a feeling I'm going to run out of time, so I thought I would talk about these more in the up and coming webinar in 2 weeks' time so that we can come back to this and review. But just think for writing, planning, organisation, and self-monitoring. Definitely sustained attention and task initiation. Okay, additional models that I think are really important that also address executive functioning when it comes to reading is the active view of reading. And it still covers, if I just get my little laser pointer, I'll go nice and slow. Is that going to, okay, yep, here it comes. It's just going a little bit slow this afternoon. Okay, we've got our word recognition, just like in the simple view. And down the bottom here, we've got our language comprehension with the ultimate goal of reading. And you can see we've got our bridging processes here, which incorporates writing. So you've got your print reading fluency, but down here we've got our graphophonological, semantic, cognitive flexibility, letter sound meaning. But over here, we also have active self-regulation, motivation, and engagement. And this is linked with the executive functioning skills. And this is a critical component of also being able to read. Working with children who have reading difficulties, if they do not have any motivation and engagement, sometimes it doesn't matter what book you put in front of them or how much you can zhuzh it up, everything can be much harder. So having tools in your toolkit to motivate and engage, you can get kids reading because they want to read. And so I think acknowledging this on a model of reading is really important, as well as acknowledging the executive functioning component. So there we are on our models. So now we're starting to sort out these models for structure and looking at it from the lens of structured literacy and the science of writing. All right, I wanted to talk a little bit about this scientific researcher, Steve Graham. Steve Graham is a very well-known researcher in writing. He's been around, his research, along with Karen Harris, has been around for more than 30 years and they continue to build on their research. So anyone who's into the research space and is looking at research in writing, you're going to find Steve Graham's name. And when I was doing my master's degree about 6 or 7 years ago, that's probably when I started to really come across his work and come across his thinking. Essentially, when he wrote this white paper in 2013, about 12 years ago, he basically says in this that you've got to teach reading and writing together. And the more you teach them together, the better your outcomes are going to be. So yes, we have structured literacy, and yes, we have certain components that we need to teach, but we have to bring them together as often as we can, rather than in isolated components, because children need to see the connection between the two because they're reciprocal. Okay, I've added these books and papers on the side just to say great top tips. If you're interested in this space, look up the book Best Practices in Writing Instruction, and also Google the reading here of Want to Improve Children's Writing. I'm pretty sure you'll get that article. All right, that's a summary of that paper. Now let's look at structured literacy. Structured literacy is characterised by the provision of systematic and cumulative teaching. So thinking of our decodable readers, we organise our decodable readers in a systematic and cumulative sequence. And we do this so that we're continually building on prior knowledge and continuing to apply the skills that we've already learned and that we've taught, so that when we introduce anything new, we're reducing that cognitive load. The model says that we need to be explicit. The component out here of being diagnostic means that we are diagnosing and assessing all the time. We're not doing pre and post tests. We might be doing them, but we're doing a lot more formative assessment and daily assessments to see if learning has taken place. And you can see in the middle here of this model that we have the components of literacy being phonology, sound symbol, which can be reading or writing, syllables, again, can be reading or writing. Morphology is a language, it's a language subset, but we do look at it through the reading and writing lens as well. And the same goes for syntax and semantics. With this in mind, I just wanted to acknowledge that this structured literacy comes from the International Dyslexic Association, and that's where this term has come from. The whole point of this term has been designed to ensure that no child is being left behind. It's up to us as teachers, when we consider our structured literacy, how we make sure that not only do we not leave everybody behind, but we pace our lessons so that they're where all children are learning where they need to be. So earlier I said that there are components of writing. So if we start with the sounds, and we hear a sound like the word cat and we hear cat, we know that we can put those together to read the word cat if we're decoding, but we know that we can write the 3 sounds to spell the word. So we start with the sounds so we can move into spellings. If we wanted to write a sentence about a cat, we have to know that a sentence is one thought, and or a simple sentence is one thought and it's a complete thought. And then we move from writing sentences to writing related sentences. So even in the early years of school, towards the end of our first year of school, and certainly in year 1 and year 2, we want to be writing related sentences where we can potentially be doing 2, 3, maybe 4 sentences in a row, so that we're working towards paragraphs. We don't have to say that we're doing multiple paragraphs, but the concept of, if we're writing about a cat, we're going to, we're writing the cat has fur, the cat drinks milk, the cat sleeps and likes to nap. All those things are related. So that would be, we would be teaching those as related sentences so that we're moving into text level. So let's have a quick look at a structured literacy planner. This planner builds on the literacy skills systematically and cumulatively through structured explicit routines. So I've got a planner here that sort of looks at your timing of what you might be doing in a structured literacy planner. You can see the first 10 minutes I've popped in a bit of a do now here for independent handwriting practice. That means the skill's already being taught and they're just coming in and doing a practice task to give them that additional practice time that's really important to build that handwriting skill. There's daily reviews in here that look at reading graphemes and then writing graphemes, dictation of previously spelled words, dictation of sentences, and even word analysis. And I've started to color code this to show you how it aligns to structured literacy. I wouldn't normally do this for a planner, but the purpose of this slide is to show you how structured literacy and all the components can continually come in at certain components during your literacy block. You can see that there's, once we move into this vocab comprehension and writing space, there's more of the syntax and semantics components and morphology that relate to comprehension. The next part of what I wanted to talk to you about is a model of writing called self-regulated strategy development. And this comes from the book that I showed earlier on best practices in writing instruction. The model's been around for a good 20 or 30 years. I've only come across it, I think, in the last 6 or 7 years. You can do the course online. It's a great way to teach writing that you can apply to what you're already doing. So it has 6 stages, and the 6 stages are that you activate and develop background knowledge. This is well known that we need to do this. You discuss, the teacher models, everyone learns to memorize our mnemonics. Then you are supported to be moving towards writing on your own, and eventually you've got your independent practice. As part of these 6 stages, I'll just note that I've put a book up. My screen looks a bit different to yours. So you can see I've got a book called Powerful Writing Strategies in the top right-hand corner. That breaks this down comprehensively. Anything that I'm showing you here today would be in this book. Okay, next slide. Oh, here we go. Here's 2 strategies that we can use for writing that I'm going to link to decodables shortly. The first one is POW. Pick your idea that you want to write about, organize your notes, and then write. So the whole point is just get an idea out. So initially, when I want to teach this idea of picking an idea, I use other books to say, what did this author pick? What did they pick here as their idea, and how did they organize it? So I will use books to organize thinking, to reinforce comprehension, which is really what this whole webinar is about. So I start with what others do before I go and do my own ideas to write. The second mnemonic here is TIDE, and TIDE stands for topic, important information or important evidence, detailed examination, and ending. And these 2, I'm going to show you how these can be modelled moving forward. So I thought I'd introduce them here and then we'll come back to them. Oh, I think I've gone the wrong way with the planner. Oh, okay. Where are we up to? Just a quick checkpoint. We're about 25 minutes in. We've looked at models of reading. We've looked at models of writing from a scientific viewpoint, from research. So we've looked at structured literacy, which came out of the International Dyslexic Association. We've looked at the simple view of writing, and which is from Berninger from 2002. That one came out. And we've also looked at the writing rope. We've started to look at practical models of writing instruction, which do come from research. And now we're going to look at putting these together, going further. So how can we use our decodable texts that we're teaching in the early years as prompts for writing? And why? Why non-fiction? So first of all, non-fiction is essential for building knowledge and developing vocabulary. Children are naturally curious, and non-fiction provides a bridge to exploring the world around them. These texts that you can see in front of you align with phonics teaching because they've been carefully designed to have their only specific graphemes in them. So in the first book here, lots of frogs. We've got, it's all about CCVC because frogs is that CC, which you can say is an FR blend, but we know that if we're going to analyse it from the word parts, that's what it would be. We've got chimps with the CH. Bing brings a bug is another one with a CC in them with the brings, but and we've got a more simpler text called Fox and Cubs, and I added another one in called Moths, but I forgot to put it on this slide, and I'll show you that one soon as well. Now I want to talk to you about a sequence of teaching that I did with this book called Lots of Frogs. So on your screen, you've got a QR code, and I wasn't willing to risk actually sharing the video, but if you've got your phones out, you can just quickly pop it up and have a look at the reel. And while you're looking at the reel, I'll just describe it to you. It's a reel of a little green frog in a tropical forest and a green tree snake approaching it like prey, and it's trying to eat the frog. And the frog makes itself invisible. It literally shrinks all its organs, and you can see it from underneath the leaf, and the frog almost completely disappears. And after that, you see that the snake so close to the frog and then just slithers off. So I showed this as a prompt for engagement before we read this book, and all the children were quite mesmerized by, for starters, the fact that the frog could make itself invisible. And already there were children telling me what they already knew about frogs. So from an SRSD perspective and from good practice teaching, I've activated background knowledge, and I've made it a point of engagement. We then started reading the book together. And I'll also point out here at this point, I had a real variation of students in my group. It was an intervention group, but I had children that could read, but found it very difficult to pay attention. I had children, older children who couldn't read at all, and I had some younger children where this was right at their level. So just like you would have in any classroom in the early years, you have extreme varying levels. That's what I had when I was doing this sequence of work. So what did we do? The children started reading, and I'm just showing you some of the pages in the book here. And we're looking here on page 2. There are lots of frogs. Frogs look wet, and some frogs have dots and blobs. Straight away from that image, we sat on this page, I would say, for about 3 or 4 minutes, because there were children in the group that straight away wanted to tell me, I've seen that frog before, I knew that one, and did you know, and did you know that this frog is venomous? And all of a sudden this additional information was coming out. So yes, we're decoding, and yes, we're all practicing our reading, but we're also, I'm assessing how much are they interested in this? How much more am I going to use this book? And is this something that is part of our topic we need to keep going with or pull back on? Everyone had a go at their reading, and we did a bit of a share read. Everyone had an attempt. There were some words that were a little bit harder for some, but essentially it was accessible to every child in the group. And the imagery from the text was the engagement in itself. And this is a bit of an add-on, Kate. Kate has provided me with some of these books, and every time I give children one of these books to read with, it actually surprises me the level of engagement that a book can provide when it's a really high quality book, whether it is a decodable or whether it is a non-decodable book. When you make great books, kids want to read them. So following on from this, we had to organise our knowledge and understanding of what we had just read. And part of this is an SRSD stage. We're still in stage 1, and we're sort of going in between stage 1 and 2 here. So I asked the children to tell me what you know. So I'm ascertaining and sort of a little bit assessing here. What do you know about frogs? And as they were telling me what they knew, I said, I think I'm going to organise what you know into topics. So I think I'll organise frogs into where they live. I'll call that habitat. What they look like, I'm going to call that appearance. And what they do, which is behaviour, and any additional features that we can think of. And you can see from this board of notes that some children just had to tell me what they already had just read about. So some might have said they live in bogs. Others were giving me additional information like, did you know that there's a frog that has a tongue that's 5 meters long? No, I did not. And we actually measured that out in the room that we were in and said, do you know that means that it would be able to stretch its tongue from one end of this room to the other? In addition to that, we added in words that you were not going to get from a decodable text that is already in the oral vocabulary of some of the children. So we ended up getting words like venomous. Some of them knew that the frog was an amphibian. They weren't quite sure of the word, but I modelled writing it, and you can see I've modelled writing it in syllables. And we also looked at the word tongue because they had brought it up, and we had a bit of a discussion about the spelling of tongue and how tricky it is. So any additional words there that are beyond the decodable, they're nice to know, but they're not must-knows for reading. And because we're having the discussion and it's a collaborative write, the children were really engaged in seeing what they know and putting it all together. Finally, I just said, I'm going to call this, I'm just going to give it an overview sentence, which will maybe be an introduction for later. Frogs are unique animals. And all the children had to do 6 sentences of their own to write about after we had done this as a part of our initial unpacking of this decodable. Here's their independent writing. You can see on the left here, this is actually my writing, and I was scribing this for a child who couldn't write. And she was giving me her knowledge and understanding in complete sentences. And some of them, I would say some can. So I was giving her some prompts there. And when she said swamps, I sounded that out and said, oh, that's tricky spelling. And also when she said known as bogs, she would not have known how to spell the word known, but I was able to just give that a little incidental teaching moment. Other children just used sentence starters that I gave them so that they could take what we had written on the board about the frogs, and then using the sentence starters, they could write sentences of their own. Some children wanted to do the same mind map as what I had done on the board rather than write in sentences, which was fine because they were all writing. And at this point for me, I felt it was a win for all children to be engaged and writing their own perspective from what we had just completed. Another part of having a good model of writing is that you get really good fidelity checklists. So I can now evaluate my teaching, and here what I've looked at is from just the activate and develop background knowledge, what things can I check in and say I've already done. So I've definitely built enthusiasm, got an idea of their background knowledge, pre-skills and vocab. There's a lot of vocab that we managed to unpack. We definitely we didn't read and discuss more than the one model, but we have started. We haven't done pre-assessment yet. And we've looked at some strategy work by the way I organise my information as they were giving me their information. As far as discussing goes, we did a little bit of discussion around organisation, and we definitely can tick off building collaborative partnerships as a culture of writing. We then need to model and put our knowledge and understanding of what we've just read onto a graphic organizer. And that's a key component to learning how to do genre writing, especially when you move into the writing to learn from year 3 onwards. And what you can see on this graphic organizer is that there are, using the tide, you've got your topic at the top here, and you've got your 3 ideas that have come out of the text. So I didn't do this directly after this lesson. I did it the following session. And what I did for that session is I said, let's read it again And some children went, but we've already read that. And I said, yeah, but now we're reading it for fluency. And part of fluency is also expression, knowledge and understanding. So we read it. And there was two parts to this now. The first part that I did this time when they're reading, it was less about the decoding, and they would read a couple of, I let them read the first page and the second page, and then I would stop. And part of my planned model that I'm showing you here is I would say, we've just read the frogs can be colourful and have dots, blobs or frills. This is telling me more about what frogs look like. So I'm going to keep this in my head as the first important detail. I was not yet modelling on the graphic organiser. I was just thinking aloud. So then we did it again for the next section. Frogs have homes in bogs, frogs have wet rocks. So instead of focusing on the decoding, this time I was saying, this section to me is about, I'm thinking this is all about where frogs live. I think that's very important information. So that's the second key piece of information that I'm going to take away from this book. So when I am thinking aloud, I'm starting to backwards plan an organizer for writing, but I'm also mentally summarizing, and I'm modeling how to mentally summarize a text, which is where we want the children to head towards when they read, so that they can tell you what they know and understand. And not only tell you what they know in random facts, but they can draw information together and say, this is everything we learned about where they live, or this is everything we learned about what they look like. Once that part of the lesson sequence was done, following that, I then modelled in a separate lesson how to put it onto this graphic organizer. I'm going to show you on the next page actually. So this, what you're looking at here, I've still got the graphic organizer on the left, but on the right here, I've got, this is my modelled script of what I'm going to sort of think aloud and say as I write the information onto the graphic organizer. So I will read to you what I would say at the beginning. Yesterday we read the book and I thought aloud as you were reading all about frogs, and I thought aloud about all the parts of an idea of tide, and I was saying them out loud. So I'm going to tell you what I know about the introduction part. I knew that the book was about frogs. So I also said that it was about what they look like, where they live, and what makes them special. So I'm going to write all of that in my introduction section. And then I would write, there are many different kinds of frogs. This book explains what frogs look like, where they live, and what makes them special. Now that whole process is a good 3 to 5 minutes. I'm not going to do this after a daily review because I don't want them sitting on the floor. I'm doing a daily review, then reading a book together, and then having me model and write, because children will end up sitting there listening to you or be sitting on the floor for too long. So I break this up, and I would probably choose to do this part probably during a snack break, for example. And then I've got my check for understanding questions over here. So I write my introduction and then I will ask them, what does the T stand for? Topic. Great. How can you tell if your topic sentence clearly tells the reader what you're writing about? And we want them to come out and say, oh, I know, because it's the main idea of what everything is about. So it's all the check for understanding questions here, where we're going into the fourth stage, which I didn't talk about too much, which is memorizing. And it's a bit like teal in the upper years. Once you start memorizing a mnemonic for how to organize your thinking, the more you do it and the more you practice it, the more it becomes an automatic way to organize your thinking, which is going back to the model, before I go any further, of the simple view of writing. We're ticking the box for working memory and executive functioning. because all that repeated modeling and scripting, eventually you won't need to be modeling it anymore. The children will be doing it for you. So we've now looked at a lesson sequence. Now I want to show you a few more models, but before we putting this all together, before we have a Q&A in a few more minutes. So think alouds. I showed you two different types of think alouds there. One was me thinking aloud as the children were reading the book. And the second think aloud that I was doing was when I was modeling my thinking as I was writing on a graphic organizer. So the modeling and thinking, this part here, I just wanted to say that there's lots of different types of ways we can model. And we know with explicit instruction, the better our model, the better the children are going to learn and be able to apply the knowledge that we've modeled. So we want to model our planning and writing with think alouds. We want to model collaborative planning. I really like the idea of co-teaching because you can do think alouds with a colleague. You can model the self-talk statements. So when I say I'm thinking about this, that becomes a language that I'm modeling for others to use. Eventually you can model self-scoring yourself on rubrics, and you can also model goal setting. Here are three more books. One is the one on chimps, one is on Bing Brings a Buck, and the third one here is on moths. So once we've taught the power and tide, we move away from having to do all the modelling to it being a lot more shared and almost that gradual release model of responsibility. Almost you won't have to do as much modelling, but initially you want to do repeated models so that it becomes almost intrinsic with the dialogue that you have with your children about how to think. You can see from these three graphic organisers that they have a lot of similarities in the way that they're organised, but they also, some of them are simpler. Like the one on moths is much more simple, and the one on chimps and bings is a lot more complex with the amount of information that's been extracted. Have a look at this one here with Bing Brings a Bug. Now, this bird is not an Australian or New Zealand bird. It's actually a cardinal. And when I was looking at this decodable, I went, what would I do with this? And I sort of, as far as writing prompts go, I looked at what type of bird is it, and then can I find other information as a prompt before reading this book? And I found a website from North America on birds, and it gave me the information that you can see on this graphic organizer, that they don't migrate, they stay in the one place all year round, and that both males and females sing. So I've got my three main pieces of information on the left, and that they're colourful birds, and then I bring it all back together in the end. I then would say, well, how else can I share this information if this is something that the children are finding really of interest? And then I would link it to literature that they already may know, or that I know that I think links really nicely. And I don't know if anyone has read Circle. I'm sure many of you have, but it just links really well to this decodable because it's about birds and what they do and how this is a non-migrating bird and this one does migrate. And you could just be reading this before or after Bing Brings a Bug to see and ascertain again knowledge and background knowledge that the children have as part of a bigger unit of work. Okay, let's have a look now. I think I'm almost done. Let's look as a summary of what we've talked about. We have used non-fiction decodables to build knowledge, vocab and writing skills. We've used them to activate background knowledge and model think alouds. I've explained in more detail the concept of SRSD and capturing that with tide, power and tide. And I've talked about how this approach links reading and writing to support all learners and develop independent structured writing.